Hello and welcome to the Dynasty Guys Fantasy Football Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Tim Goins, sitting here with Eric Calvert and Adam Dolan. How's it going, guys?
Good.
Not too bad.
Great. Well, week 2 is in the books. NFL season week 2. What do you think?
It's a roller coaster like always.
It is, but I'm so glad it's back. I'm getting depressed thinking about it ending already.
What stood out to you so far?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start with my interesting thing of the week. So Patty, my homeboy, obviously we know Tim's very high on him. I think we all are, not in just real football, but actual fantasy football.
His jersey is on the wall.
Of course. So I don't know if you guys were watching the same game I was, but it almost felt like I was watching a college football game. I mean, so in the second quarter, the first quarter they hold him to nothing. And I'm playing Mahomes in one of my leagues this week. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe I got a shot. Second quarter comes around, he goes 12 for 17 for 278 yards and 4 touchdowns. And I felt like it was 4 passes in a row. You know, it just felt that way. They were all 27-yard plus touchdown passes. So, and I looked up a stat that said that was the most in a quarter since Drew Brees threw for 294 in 2008. So, I mean, when you're in the same company as Drew Brees, you know, that's good stuff.
It's pretty solid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was telling you earlier today that I had read it something that said that I think it was 5 or 6 plays in a row, passing plays were over 25 yards. So, I mean, when has that happened ever in history?
Well, and just not the passes. I mean, he was dropping everything in the bucket. It's just that whole offense is crazy. They have so much speed. I don't know how anybody's going to stop it.
It was surprising that they held him scoreless in the second half. Although
that was also
McCole Hardman had a 74-yarder called back.
Yeah.
Right.
In the third quarter, I think it was.
Yeah.
It's still, yeah.
Well, and kind of the way that offense runs, I don't know that they would have if they would have actually needed to score. Since they were winning, I think they were kind of okay with not scoring. But if Oakland was making it close, I think they probably would have had.
You know, being a rival, though, you'd think they'd want to really put it to them.
They might have just been hoping no one else got hurt in that game and get out of there unscathed. So, okay, well, I'll go ahead and move on. My most interesting thing was a tweet about Mitchell Trubisky, Adam's favorite quarterback. So this is Warren Sharp. I know a lot of people follow Warren Sharp. He does some pretty cool stuff on Twitter, but this one kind of shocked me. So out of 18 plays on the Denver side of the field, only 3 of them were passes. And in that game, Trubisky became the first quarterback to average less than 4.4 yards per attempt and threw less than 120 yards since he did it in 2018. There's only 2 other people that have done that, and that's Brock Osweiler and Jay Cutler. Those are not great people to be in the same sentence as when it comes to quarterbacks. So if you're high on Trubisky in your Dynasty League, you may want to reevaluate how Nagy is using him and maybe what Nagy thinks of his arm talent.
Yeah, shoot, and we'll go back to his comments from at halftime after their week 1 game. And they ask him about Trubisky and the offense and how it's going. And he says, well, if we'll trust the system, then things will work. So he basically is telling you, I don't trust my quarterback, but I don't need my quarterback because my system's going to work.
Well, and going back to week 1, they threw 33 straight passes. Right. So maybe that says something else about Trubisky, but kind of an interesting fact that not everyone's probably aware of.
Yes, very, very true. All right, so I've got a trivia question for you, and this wraps around my interesting thing that I've seen so far is, can you name a couple of quarterbacks that have more fantasy points right now after 2 weeks than Russell Wilson, Carson Wentz, Deshaun Watson, Matt Ryan, Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, and Jimmy Garoppolo?
We don't want to spoil it, do we?
Yeah. We actually talked about this earlier today.
Okay, well, I wasn't there, so yeah.
Yeah.
Because let me guess here. We'll go ahead and let you give us the punchline.
Well, that's fine. Who was it? Who'd you come up with?
Dak and Lamar, number 1 and 2, or 2 and 1. So.
Oh, okay. And I'm talking about like names you wouldn't normally think about. But no, I agree. They're having great years. I'm talking about Case Keenum.
Really?
Number 1.
Wow.
Yeah, that was interesting. And Andy Dalton.
Oh, yeah.
And so I saw something earlier today, Andy, that the Bengals, I think, are running over 75% of their plays are pass plays, something like that. So as we discussed last week, they're just really on a roll with the new coaching system and just throwing passes left and right. So I don't know. I found that interesting. I'm not saying to go out and pick up Case Keenum, but the 2 weeks that he's played so far, he hasn't gone wild. It's just been 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. So we're at a time right now where we're going to talk about these quarterbacks in a minute that have been getting hurt. If you need somebody to pick up, my guess is Case Keenum's probably available.
Right. So you're obviously not playing him this week.
You're not going to play him this week against Chicago.
But you're right.
But it might be somebody you want to keep an eye on.
Well, and with that in mind, you may be able to get him for free if, in a fab budget. If you can put a $0 bid and sit him on your bench for a week, you won't have to pay for him next week when people might be trying to stream him.
Great comment. Yes, absolutely. Okay, well, let's move on. We're going to talk about injury report and roster moves here.
Okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and start. First up, we have the Rams. We want to say that this is being recorded on Wednesday, so a lot of the official injury reports aren't actually out, so definitely keep monitoring this as the week goes on. But with the information we have here, we'll start now. Tyler Higbee was out with a lung injury. He went out of the game, went to the hospital and was coughing up blood, and then right after that they said it was not serious. So sounds serious to me, but apparently you can cough up blood and be okay.
That's scary.
Yeah. So he's the only one on the Rams report that I can point at right now that's fantasy relevant, so we'll move on. The Cardinals, David Johnson had that same wrist injured that he had that set him out for a whole year. I think that was that last year or 2 years ago?
It was last year.
Was it?
No, I'm sorry.
2 years
You're right.
Yeah,
It was
2 years ago. So anyhow, it was the same wrist. Apparently, he's good to go, but I think that's a good reminder that if you have David Johnson, you probably want to stash Chase Edmonds just to make sure you have his handcuff.
It's weird a wrist injury sets you out a full season, especially as a running back. I mean, you think they could cast that bad boy up and go out there, but
even pass catchers, you see them do that kind of stuff. So yeah, that is kind of strange.
And it's strange to keep having the same type of injury,
especially that upper body wrist.
Yes.
Come on.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so moving on, the 49ers. This is a person that maybe some people haven't heard of. His name is Joe Staley. He's their left tackle. He broke his fibula. He's out for 6 to 8 weeks. That kind of, puts a little bit of a damper on what you may expect from Matt Breida and Raheem Mostert. Even though they seem like good options, I would definitely still play them, but just keep that in mind whenever you're watching that game. And going on to the 49ers wide receivers, the snap shares are pretty interesting. I think a lot of people have kind of decided that Curtis Samuel looks like the receiver to own there, and I don't necessarily disagree. But Dante Pettis actually outsnapped him.
You mean Deebo Samuel?
Deebo Samuel, what'd I say, Dante?
You said Curtis.
Oh, okay, Curtis Samuel.
That's fine.
Yeah, Deebo Samuel, okay. Excuse me. But Dante Pettis and Goodwin actually outsnapped him, and so did Richie James. So kind of an interesting snap share that you're seeing there that you may want to keep an eye on. And like I said, I would pick Samuel probably over all of them, but just something to watch.
He looks good.
Yeah, he does.
Like man, instead of Shanahan's offense, I mean, gosh, give him credit. They look so much better than I was expecting from them.
Yeah,
it's 2 weeks into the season, but man.
Well, and even their defense, I think they've had 2 straight road wins, and they've allowed 17 points in each game. So that's pretty good,
so
pretty solid.
If you're a Dynasty owner out there, do you target Samuel now, or are you trying to pick him up cheap? Or are you wanting to wait a little while? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you can get him now, I would get him because he's probably only going to get more expensive as he has a breakout game or something like that. And obviously, he's a good talent that a lot of people really liked. So if someone's low on him, I would say now's the time to go get him.
Okay.
Moving on, the Texans, Laramie Tunsil, their one okay lineman, went out with an ankle injury. They say it's not considered serious, so it looks like he may play this week, but something to monitor if you're a Deshaun Watson or a Duke Johnson, Carlos Hyde, any of those guys. So keep an eye on that. The Jaguars staying in the same division. No real injuries, but pretty interesting as far as who's going to be the number one wide receiver. We've seen some change up in the quarterback, and that seems to have changed who they're going to on their passing. Everyone assumed that it was going to be Westbrook this year, and I think with Foles it probably would have, but last game he had 5 targets and caught 1 ball for 3 yards. So
who's the other, Marquise Lee, or is he? And he was out last week, but he didn't get much. He didn't do much in the first week either.
Right, and then on the other side you have DJ Chark, who had 9 targets and 7 catches, 55 yards, and a touchdown. That's his second game in a row that he kind of exploded.
His last name sounds like a misprint to me. Yeah. Every time I read Chark, I'm like, that cannot.
I heard someone do the baby shark to DJ Shark, and now I can't unhear it. So, yeah. And on top of that, Chris Conley has looked pretty solid 2 weeks in a row too. So there may be a little bit of the changing of the guards there in Jacksonville. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Yeah. Any Packers? Aaron Jones looked like he was great last week. And then you see today that LaFleur wants it to be a 50-50 snap share. So proceed with caution, like we've been saying from the get-go. And then wide receiver 2 in Green Bay, a lot of people forget that those tend to have a lot of value. MVS and Allison basically had the same game last week, but the week before MVS was quite a bit better. If you look at the snap counts, MVS was 87% of the plays and Allison was 5% or 45%, excuse me. So I would say that MVS is still the number 2 to own there. I know some people are kind of wavering on that, but I would stick with MVS there.
Well, I don't know if we're talking about these guys later on. I know we talked trade targets in a little bit, but I didn't even for these guys slip my mind. But we've got to look at the 2 teams that they played the first 2 games of the season.
Right.
They play Minnesota, a division rival that has a great defense, in Chicago. So these guys are going to have so much more value than they've had the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Aaron Rodgers not look great, and
right.
history says that's going to change pretty soon. So, yeah, that's a good point.
Just relax.
Yep. It's only week 2, even though it feels like we've been playing forever. It's only week 2.
Isn't that what Aaron Rodgers says?
Yeah,
Just relax.
Yeah. And then the last one that I have here is the Bills. I hate to see it, but a Devin Singletary hamstring issue. They're saying it's day-to-day. Even if he suits up and plays this week, I don't think anyone's probably excited to play him. So I would be cautious with him.
Okay. Let's talk about the Raiders real quick. Josh Jacobs he's nursing a groin injury, according to the coach. So, keep an eye on that. His usage has been interesting the first couple of games. He's not been targeted too much in the passing department. I think just one target. He caught it for 28 yards. You would think that they would go to him more often, but I noticed in the Chiefs game, every third down or every passing situation, it seemed like they pulled him out and put in, Andre Washington or Jalen Richard. So I hope for the Josh Jacobs owners out there that they increase those chances.
Yeah.
He sure has the capability to do it, but, temper your expectations until you see a change anyway. For the Chiefs, we know that Damian Williams, LaShawn McCoy were both hurt in the last game. Like we talked about, the official injury report's not out yet, so I don't know where they're at. I think they have been practicing a little bit, so they may be good to go. If Darwin Thompson's out there, I'm sure you've probably heard his name.
Just to correct you, McCoy did not practice.
Okay.
And I think Damian Williams also did not practice.
Okay.
So they're not suited up at all.
So they're not practicing yet.
Still early, though.
But last we heard, they were both expected to play this weekend. So, but no, thanks for that info. Again, Darwin Thompson, we all liked him in the preseason. He hasn't really gotten much of a chance yet. He may be a trade target for you if he's, or I doubt if he's available on the waiver wire, but he might be somebody you look at trading for. We all are very high on him, believe that if he can get an opportunity, he would be a fantasy stud, especially in that offense.
Yeah.
The other choice that you have there right now and is the Demarcus Robinson, McCole Hardman choice. Of course, we had a discussion earlier today about this, and I'm not sure where you stand, Adam, but I think it was kind of unanimous that for the current usage right now, we believe Demarcus Robinson's probably got the best outlook as far as or floor, say, and then McCole Hardman may have a higher ceiling. But I think we both believe, and I don't want to speak for you, so correct me, but that McCole Hardman probably has more long-term value.
Yeah.
So if you're in a dynasty league and you have both of them, you could keep them both, or if you wanted to try to trade DeMarcus while he's still high, that might be something you want to as well, because we all believe that McCole Hardman's in the future is going to be, is going to get a lot of chances. So, but it wouldn't hurt to keep them either. I mean, they're both in a high-flying offense.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's almost a toss-up situation. Yeah. I mean, even when I know we had talked last week and you came to ask us like, hey, okay, I've got Sammy Watkins, I've got McCole Hardman. I really want to play both, but I can't get myself to do that. I think if you own any of those guys outside of like Tyreek Hill, I think, and Travis Kelce, you're going to think, man, I don't know that I can start all of these guys, but in a plus matchup, I don't think anybody would blame you. So, to your point.
Yeah. And there's going to be a lot of those matchups, I think, this year.
I think every matchup is a plus matchup.
Obviously. I mean, you saw what Jacksonville did to Deshaun Watson, and Mahomes made it look like he was playing a college team. So
right,
he's unstoppable.
On the Saints, of course, probably everybody's heard about Drew Brees. According to the NFL Network's Tom Pelissero, Drew Brees is going to have surgery to repair a torn ligament on his thumb. He may have already had it. I'm not sure.
He was having it today, is the last I heard.
So it's on his throwing hand. They estimate about a 6-week absence. I also read just before we came on that they're not going to put him on IR. So he should be, they're expecting obviously a minimal amount of time to recover here. So, in the meantime, Bridgewater is going to fill in for him. Personally, I think Bridgewater's fine. He's not Drew Brees, but he's been a very serviceable quarterback when he's played before. Thought he played well when he was in Minnesota. This is his chance. He's got a lot of good weapons around him. I look for the main weapons to maybe take a slight downturn, but I wouldn't take him out of the lineup. I would say now that you can game plan and Bridgewater can go through the full week of practicing with the ones and working, making that connection with them, I think they'll be fine this week.
One thing that slightly scared me is I heard someone was asking Sean Payton if he thought Bridgewater would be a good replacement for Drew Brees, and he said something to the effect of, "What makes you think it's going to be Bridgewater?" So Taysom Hill may throw a wrench in this whole thing. And if he does, I think that is a downgrade to Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara and even Jared Cook to a degree. So keep an eye on that.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that. It just would shock me if they do that. I think he may just be saying that so that the next defense can't game plan for a single person. But I don't know, Adam, you were going to say something.
Well, yeah, just to add a blurb in there. Those guys that play for that offense may be great trade targets to go after. Yeah. I mean, after 1, 2, 3 weeks of maybe a downgrade to those guys, to the Michael Thomases of the world, and even the Alvin Kamaras, I think they may lean more heavily on him in that offense. But I think those are definitely guys that people can get discouraged on, that they may look at it in the aspect of, well, I'm not going to have higher value for these guys. I have to dump them now. They may not realize that Breeze is probably coming back. So I think those are definitely guys to go target. They still have a lot of value.
Who are the Saints playing this week? I think it was a pretty decent defense. I think you may want to wait a week or two and let Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara maybe disappoint and then let people get even lower on them. And if that's the case, I think you can get better value for them where people may be tilting. And
they play Seattle.
Yeah,
and like I said, exactly. It may be better to wait a few weeks, but it's almost a Mike Evans situation or O.J. Howard. It's easy to get really down on those guys, even though you see the talent, you see the upside. It's really easy to want to get rid of them. So
yeah.
Okay, the next one I have is not particularly an injury report, but it's O.J. Howard. Just talk real quick about him. He's kind of been in a slump. He was talked about quite a bit preseason as being maybe in the second tier of tight ends. A lot of people, if you have a Dynasty league, you may have even, targeted him, trying to get him this year. So far, 2 games, he's had 4 catches for 32 yards. Not very good. I think part of that was game planning. Bruce Arians actually said that Howard needs to play better, but he also said he expects more balls to come his way or something like that. I forget what the exact quote was, but anyway, don't give up on him yet.
I would just caution, this is what Bruce Arians does, though. He's never had a fantasy-relevant tight end, so watch the production and see if Bruce Arians is saying he's going to get more balls is just him trying to motivate Howard to play a little bit better, or if they actually start throwing him the ball, because I could see where, because he's so reliant on that slot receiver, the tight end just never is a good option.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about that, though, is that in the Thursday night game, they really talked about how Bruce Arians was completely handing the reins over to Byron Leftwich. So I would say we don't know what to expect from that offense. I mean, we obviously don't know the exact breakdown of the coaching scheme, but they were just talking about how high Bruce Arians was on a Byron, and he was basically giving him credit for, or discredit of how the offense was doing early, but how he really trusted him to call those plays. So
yeah, as we've seen with coaches, sometimes they say one thing and do another.
Right. So. Well, it takes 2-3 bad weeks, and then that coach, once they have a good week, that coach is he's taking over the play calls.
Ron Rivera is always the defensive coordinator when they turn it around. Right. So
Well, nice segue into the Carolina Panthers. So Cam Newton's hurt. There's actually been mixed reports about him. Actually, just a little bit ago, I heard he was not playing this weekend, but then earlier I heard they really haven't made a decision. They're just going to see how it goes. He was not practicing, but in a walking boot of some sort. So he's I think aggravated the foot injury that he had in the preseason.
That he didn't have, according to the team.
That he didn't have in the preseason. So keep an eye on that. I'm not sure what to expect there, and I'm not sure that you want to rely on the backup quarterback right now. So
I mean, are we even starting him with confidence though? Because he's been so inaccurate. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, you're starting Christian McCaffrey and maybe Greg Olsen, and from then...
DJ Moore looks really good.
I don't know that I would start him.
The problem is he's so dependent. But you're right, I mean...
Right. I think you want to see what if Cam doesn't play, who the backup's going to throw to. Because, like we've discussed, every quarterback has their favorite receivers or favorite plays that they like, and a quarterback can come in the same system as another one and have different favorite receivers.
Yeah.
So I think we're... Just like you talked about with Minshew in Jacksonville.
Right. And
now you have DJ Shark catching all the balls instead of D.D. Westbrook. So that could happen here. Of course, last week we told you to start Antonio Brown. He was kind of iffy. He did start. He played well. I'm sure everyone saw that. So
I mean, he doubled everybody's targets. That was crazy to me.
Yeah. I would keep him in your lineup. The Dolphins, I don't have anything injury report for them on offense. Of course, on defense, we've noted that they've traded away 2 first-round draft picks. I think the opinion was that they were just tanking, but after studying this and reading some of the comments from the GM and the coach, I really believe they're doing what they feel is right for the team right now and not trying to tank necessarily. So they seem to be, both of those situations were special circumstance. Even Laramie Tunsil was reported to say that he would have traded himself for the offer that they were given. So when the players that are being traded are buying into the reason why they're traded, I would think that maybe the tone in the locker room is going to settle down a little bit. That doesn't mean I think they're going to beat Dallas this weekend. I think you should play every Dallas player you have. But, adult males have pride, and they may start playing well. So I would just caution expectations for too much or for too long, because I believe they're going to do something at some point. They're not going to get beat 43-0 every week. So anyway.
Yeah, and we had the discussion earlier of, even if they have that pride and they start playing, do they have the talent to hold a legitimate good NFL offense to less than 28 or 35 points?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Well, the good thing about that is, though, we don't care.
Right, yeah.
We care about their fantasy value.
Right.
We want them to be in bad matchups, but bad scenarios for their defense.
Right.
We want high-scoring games.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and move on to Washington. We all know Jordan Reed is a walking concussion. So he has not passed the concussion protocol yet. He's still questionable. So Vernon Davis is a viable start option, not this week, but any week that they're not probably playing Chicago. Dallas gallops out for 2 to 4 weeks. So they're not really sure. They're doing some meniscus trim-up stuff. So obviously, like Tim said, I would start almost everybody on their offense or anybody that I basically
play the water boy.
Yeah. I mean, Kellen Moore might go in there. I'm not really sure. So, obviously that's upgrade somebody like Randall Cobb or even like Blake Jarwin or even a Witten. I mean, gosh dang. Pull him out of the booth and he may average a touchdown per game.
He may.
I would love that. So, anyway, going on to Philly. They have a litany of injuries. Deshaun Jackson. I'll just throw them all in the same sentence. Deshaun, Alshon, and Goddard are all out for the next few weeks. We're not sure on Goddard, but Deshaun with the abdominal strain and Alshon with the calf. So I told Eric this earlier, but Philly seems to really want to air the ball out. I don't know if they don't trust their offensive line. I know they look shaky against Atlanta, so they've thrown, over the past 2 games, they've thrown a total of 87 passes. So over 40 a game. So I think you can really start somebody like a Nelson Aguilar with confidence. So or Arcega Whiteside. He hasn't done much, but he definitely has the volume that he may need. With the Giants, we all know we got it on every single system that we have or every alert. Eli's out. Daniel Jones is in. I would not start any of their people other than Saquon and Evan Ingram. I mean, not with confidence. We don't know what we're going to see out of him. We saw him in the preseason. He looked great, but I think it's almost like a wait and see kind of situation with New York.
Well, I would like to add at New York, obviously Golden Tate has been suspended. So in week 5, I think he will come back. He's maybe a good stash, someone that you can either get cheap or off the waiver wire because no one stepped up to be that wide receiver 1. And with Daniel Jones there, you're going to assume he's going to throw a lot of screen passes, which is what Golden Tate excels at. So he's someone to keep your eye on.
Good point. Yeah, so next to Pittsburgh, the same situation. We know Ben's out, Rudolph's in. I know Eric's very happy about that. He's got James Washington. He said James Washington is wide receiver 1 starting here out to the rest of the season. You heard it here first. James Conner plans to play. But I still will say this again. I said it last week. Jalen Samuels and Benny Snell Jr. are guys that I think are easy stashes. If they're out on the waiver wire or you want to go get them for cheap, James Conner is a walking injury also, and we know that the Steelers love to lean heavily on their running game. So whether it's passing the ball to them, they like to have that workhorse back. So those guys are definitely good handcuffs.
Well, he's already injured. I mean, he has that. Is it a knee contusion or something like that? It'll be interesting to see if he does go out.
Old bruise or whatever.
If they go to Jalen Samuels or if they try to split it up with Snell and Samuels, because typically they're we stick with one guy and we run him until he dies type of team. So it'll be interesting to see what they do this year.
Well, and the offense took a good step up, I thought, after Ben came out of the game. So we'll see kind of how Rudolph runs the offense. But I think that definitely adds more value to somebody we were getting down on in Vance McDonald. So
yeah, and also I think a lot of people have some concerns about Juju, but he was actually hyper-targeted once Rudolph came in. So I think you can still play him with some confidence. Obviously, there's some unknown there, but I think he's going to at least get the volume where he won't kill your team.
Sure. Well, if you know the owner and they got concerns, you need to go get them.
Yeah.
Next to Cincinnati, Mixon was not on the injury report. Their O-line is absolutely beaten and battered. They had another story I was reading today of one of the rookies they started, and it wasn't even an injury story. It was something, and they showed a few clips of this guy that he's basically so unrefined. There were 4 or 5 plays in a row where he just is walking in the middle of nowhere, like letting guys run through the line. It's almost like he's so confused. Their line has no unison. They're just not one unit. And I think that matters more being an offensive line than your actual talent. I mean, in the whole scheme of things. So
at least get your body in the right spot to get in someone's way.
Right. Well, and that would point more to Tim's point earlier. That's why they're throwing the ball so much, because I don't think they feel the confidence in the run game.
Andy Dalton has the second most passing yards so far this year, only behind Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. And I would bet he has the most attempts. He's at least up there.
Oh, I'm sure.
I just want to add, too, I heard 2 conflicting reviews on A.J. Green. One said that he's on the practice field and looking pretty good, and one said he's had a minor setback and it will be an extra few weeks. So that affects John Ross, maybe even affects Andy Dalton and Tyler Boyd, so keep an eye on that.
Yeah, yet to see. On to Cleveland. Higgins still knee questionable. OBJ wasn't on anything, no injury designation. Hilliard's back. He cleared the concussion protocol. So I know I said something about Dearness Johnson last week. I thought he looked pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys watched him. I thought he would give Chubb a run for his money. I know I saw a report today that said they'd like to get Chubb's more touches.
Yeah.
I think they need to, but we'll see how that offense.
I always love it when coaches say that. It's like, you're the one that has control over that, and you can do it.
Well, talking about lines, their line didn't look very good.
Yeah, they've looked really bad.
Their whole offense.
Chubb's getting hit in the backfield. Seemed like 9 out of 10 times.
Yep.
So.
Well, and I see Njoku may require surgery, so they have no idea how long he'll be sidelined. I think he was out with a concussion, but it looks like a wrist injury.
Yeah, I was going to say he also hurt his wrist. Yeah.
So I think we can all agree that Cleveland offense. I mean, I was talking to you. I think they had 15 drives and 23 points against the Jets, and most of their drives started in plus, or at least at their own 40-yard line. So that's never a good sign.
They are not as advertised.
Yeah, right. And the Jets are a good defense, but they're not that good.
Oh gosh, yeah, not when you're on the field the whole game.
Right.
Yeah, and on to Trubisky, I had one guy, Trubisky, pop up earlier this morning, and he was on the injury report for his pride because it is hurt. And Matt Nagy actually was seen adding him to that, so I just wanted to throw that in there.
I hope he's serious. I'd like to see more production out of him. Yeah. All right, great. Let's move on to our trending up, trending down players. So our trending up, I'll just kick this off real quick. I've already talked about both of these. The Dallas Cowboys offense, I mean, literally, like we just mentioned, you can play just about anybody this week. They're also trending up because they're just playing really well. I mean, this new system that they're in with their new offensive coordinator is turning Dak loose. And Dak looks like a stud. Yep. I mean, he really does. I'm along with a lot of people at this table expecting them to just really play well the rest of the year. I don't see them slowing down at all. So play them if you got them. And then McCole Hardman and Demarcus Robinson, Tyreek Hill's still out. Both of these guys are going to be trending up. I think we talked about McCole Hardman last week. Demarcus Robinson, we didn't really talk about last week, and I really did not expect him to have that kind of game. I'm not sure I expect him to have another game that well.
Yeah,
I don't think
it would surprise me if he does, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that was his ceiling. But could he get 120 yards and a touchdown? Sure. I mean, playing in that offense,
right?
I think it's.
Well, and I don't think Andy Reid gets enough credit for his scheme. I know a lot of people talk about him, but when you watch the game, I mean, the first touchdown he had, there's nobody within 10 yards of him.
Yeah,
I mean, I know Patrick Mahomes is great, but a lot of the touchdowns he was throwing, even the touchdown to McCole Hardman, he had at least 3 or 4 yards separation on those guys. So,
well, and of course, I love Patrick Mahomes, but even the ball he threw, the first touchdown he threw to Demarcus Robinson wasn't even on target.
Right.
The
second one.
He had to kind of stop.
The second one was the same way. I mean,
I feel like the second one was on the back shoulder. I mean, to me, that was dropping a dime because he had to put it in that spot because he was covered. But that first one, I mean, like you said, he's wide open. He actually almost stopped, reached back to catch the ball, and then ran in for a score. But you're absolutely right. The scheme that they put together, and that's what happened with Sammy the first week. He had one out in the flat where he's wide open. They just missed him. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say also on the Chiefs' whole thing, there's a decent chance, based on Sammy Watkins' injury history, that both of these guys are the starters at some point when Tyreek is out.
Sure, that's fair.
So if you have either one of them and that happens, you can pretty much slot them in every week.
Right. Yeah.
So that's another thing to keep an eye on.
If they were your 1 and 2, like we talked about earlier, you could probably feel safe in starting both of those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I would compare it to a Rams offense last year. I'll talk about them in just a little bit, kind of where they, about those guys, but all 3 of their wide receivers finished in the top 20.
Yeah.
Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, and Cooper Kupp.
Right.
So, I mean, and obviously Todd Gurley was Todd Gurley, but it's just, I see a very similar offense. I mean, all of those guys have a ton of value.
Honestly,
consistent
I think
value.
They're better because Mahomes is so good. I mean, nothing against Goff, but he's not Mahomes.
Right.
So, okay, I'll move on to my trending up players. I have probably a list of 7 or 8 here, but I want to focus on a few of them. First off, we kind of talked about earlier, but James Washington. Him and Mason Rudolph have been together since freshman year in college, and they've had a connection ever since. I don't know what it is, but Mason can find Washington, and Washington can get open when Mason is throwing him the ball. So I'm not saying Washington's going to take over Juju or anything like that, but he's going to get targets, and he's going to get valuable targets, the kind of targets that Rudolph is good at throwing. As an OSU fan, he was a frustrating quarterback to watch because he could throw the ball 50 yards on a dime every time, but if you asked him to throw it 15 yards over the middle of the field, he's going to overthrow him by 10 yards. So where Washington excels is also where Rudolph excels. So I really expect him to take a pretty big jump forward. And also with Dante Moncrief kind of being Dante Moncrief, I think that's going to give him more opportunity as well.
Well, and we got to see a preview in the preseason.
Right.
I mean, we got to see what they can be. I mean, I know you rant, and we all did. We rant and raved about these guys, and we were just waiting for the day that Ben Roethlisberger stepped aside. So.
And it's finally here.
Not by choice, but...
Yeah. The next guy that I want to talk about is, and I know I'm butchering his first name, but it's Damiere Byrd. He is the wide receiver 3 for the Cardinals. If you look at the target share, he's up there with Fitz and Christian Kirk. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty sure he's probably free on pretty much every waiver wire. A lot of people aren't paying any attention to him, but he's had 5 or 6 receptions in the past 2 games, and the way that they're going to have to throw that ball when they get behind, he's going to be a guy that has a decent floor. So definitely keep an eye on him.
What about Crabtree? We talked about this last week because I actually mentioned I thought Damiere Byrd's targets were going to go down. They did not.
Right.
So how do you see that playing out? I mean, is Crabtree just an afterthought on that offense now?
It's hard to say because it's his first week. You don't know if they're easing him into that offense or if that's just the way they're going to go. But Byrd has looked good in both of those games, so I don't know why they would take targets away from him.
Yeah, he has. I also saw that Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk were number 1 and number 3 in the number of slot targets so far this year.
Yep. So that offense as a whole, I think, is underrated right now. It's going to pick up and get better. So if you can get those guys, I would go get them.
They're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, they almost beat a Baltimore team last week. They really could have, but they can't stop anybody.
Right.
Which is great for fantasy. So.
Well, and their best defensive player comes back in week 5.
Right.
So that will help them a little bit. Other guys just to keep an eye on, I'm not going to give analysis, but Will Dissly, Raheem Mostert, Peyton Barber, Greg Olsen, and as we mentioned earlier, Randall Cobb. Those are all guys that you could maybe spot start this week and may have some future value as well.
So Peyton Barber is interesting. I actually have him in our League of Record Dynasty. Everybody preseason was talking, basically giving up on him, right? It was like Ronald Jones or no, they didn't want anybody on that team. And now we're seeing Peyton actually have some production. I think I read something where he had the most broken tackles or something so far this season, which,
Well, and he was like top 5 last year, if I remember right.
So why does he not get more respect?
I think it's that offensive line he's attached to.
It's a volume thing, too.
He gets the volume.
Well, they just didn't show an emphasis to run the ball.
Yeah.
To actually use those guys, I think, is the problem. Obviously, we know their fantasy value is going to be tied to the amount of touches that they get, and I just didn't think, this was my opinion on them, I just didn't think with those 2-headed guys back there that one of them was going to get a sufficient amount of targets to feel confidence.
And that's why I think he's trending up, is because it was a decent split between him and Ronald Jones this week. I know that Peyton Barber had almost 20 carries, and Ronald Jones had not very many.
Oh, I thought you were meaning they were even.
No.
Yeah, there was a large split.
A large disparity between who got the touches. So that's why I have Barber trending up, and as we will talk about in a second, Ronald Jones trending down.
Sure. Adam, who do you have?
Yeah, so these guys are really obvious. I was talking to Eric about this, especially these first 2 guys, but I just think back to earlier in the season, and I cannot believe where they're at right now. So I start with Tom Brady. I know he's been a good quarterback for a long time, but I think especially my eyes were telling me for the last year, at least year and a half, that he was on the downhill, at least for fantasy production. We obviously know he's a great quarterback. He wins football games, but the amount of throws they were allowing him to have and the amount of impact they were allowing him to have on games was just trending downward. Well, we're not seeing that this year. He's a QB2 so far this year. He's QB2 so far this year, and he finished QB14 last year. So I think I kind of expect him to be in that range. I kind of expect him to finish, obviously, closer to the fringe QB1 area, but it's just been a shock so far this year how much production he's had. Obviously, he played Miami. I'm kind of discounting that, but the Pittsburgh game was a lot of value also.
Yeah.
Impressive, too.
Well, you have it here. The weapons he has are incredible. He has the best wide receiver, if not one of the best wide receivers in Antonio Brown, probably the best slot receiver in the game right now in Julian Edelman, and then the most freak athlete wide receiver in Josh Gordon, and then he's got James White, Rex Burkhead, and Sony Michel behind him. He's got some options.
Right. Yeah, so the next guy's Austin Eckler. I don't care who you are, you cannot tell me you thought he would be the RB1 today.
Right.
And he's the RB1 in half-point PPR by 3.5 points per game. So I just think, I'm not sure what to expect from this guy. I just feel like I almost feel like he's a good target to kind of try to trade away, especially if you don't know what to expect from if Melvin Gordon's going to come back. I'm not sure that his value ever gets any higher than it is right now.
Right.
But it's continued to go up week to week. We were talking, he had 12 carries week 1 and 17 last week. So he's not even getting this huge volume, and I'm not sure that that's going to change.
Yeah.
So I think that he's definitely a guy that's trending up, but I can't see him sustaining that level of production.
Yeah, and we were talking about this earlier, and it kind of makes you question how good of a running back Melvin Gordon is. Because if he ends up going, I know a lot of people are really high on him and, have him in a dynasty league, they're holding on to him, but if he ends up going to a team that doesn't have that line, he might just be a mediocre guy. So you may try to trade him before he becomes a dumpster fire wherever he goes to.
Right. Yeah, so in the last guy is DJ Shark. I mean, we talked about him a little bit earlier. Obviously, he's trending up, and he's an easy guy to pick. But to your point earlier, with the new quarterback situation, all we can do is judge based off what we've seen so far, and what we've seen so far is this guy is going to continue going up. So
yeah.
All right, great. Well, let's move on to the trending down section. Adam, why don't you kick us off there too?
Yeah, so I actually mentioned this guy earlier too, but Baker Mayfield. I love him with all of my heart, but that whole offense as a whole just looks almost like a dumpster fire. They just look like they're not firing. I mean, obviously it's earlier in the season, but I just think temper expectations, temper starting this guy for a little bit, let their offense get to firing on all cylinders. We know Freddie Kitchens, he's still a new head coach, first time being a head coach, right? I mean, other than the last 8 games of last year. So, and I think we had talked about this earlier, it seems to be when you have a head coach removal or somebody step in, the team seems to rally around a guy, or things seem to go your way. You win games that maybe you shouldn't have.
Yeah, especially in that situation where the team didn't like the previous coach and were kind of on board with the replacement in Freddie Kitchens.
Right. So the Baker hype was real this year. I'd absolutely keep him on your dynasty leagues. I think he's going to be fantastic, but I'd like to see a little bit more from him, especially with the weapons that he has. There's no excuse for that offense looking so terrible.
Yeah, and I, as a Baker hater, love to see his name on this, but there's no way he continues to look this bad. Even though his line is letting him down right now, he'll figure it out. So I agree. Hold on to him.
Okay, the only one I have today is Cam Newton. It's kind of obvious he's trending down. I don't know if that's just because of the injury and, he hasn't been able to really overcome that this year. I mean, we're just 2 games into the season, but he's trending down. I would say if you could get something for him now, I doubt if you could, but if you could, I would trade him away, especially if you have anyone else to play. You're not probably going to be playing him, possibly even if he does play. So, consider that.
Yeah.
So, Eric?
Okay, well, we've kind of mentioned all mine, but I'm just going to throw them out there. Dante Moncrief, Mitchell Trubisky, Ronald Jones, and Joe Mixon. They're all in bad situations, maybe with the exception of Mixon. Mixon just hasn't performed and has been injured, so it's really hard to trust him right now. So, we've talked about him. I'm not going to go into it again, but just those guys in general have not been impressive.
Okay. All right, so the next segment is trade targets or time to move on. We're going to start with trade targets. So, Eric, why don't you kick us off there now for who do we target for a trade?
Okay, well, I've got 2 guys here. The first one is Terry McLaurin. He's looked really, really good these first 2 weeks, and he's really young. And he's done that with a mediocre at best quarterback. One of the things we talk about a lot is he came from Ohio State, which is exactly where his future quarterback came from, and they had this connection there. And as we were talking about with Washington and Rudolph, that just seems to play into their ability to shine when that happens. So I don't know that I would necessarily trade for him right now because he's had 2 great weeks, and I don't know that you're going to get him with as young as he is. But I forget, Washington's playing a pretty good defense this week. Chicago, yes. So maybe after the dip in Chicago, people will think that week 1 and 2 were just a smoke screen.
Right.
Maybe you can go get him at that point. And then my other guy is MVS. We talked about him being the number 2 in Green Bay. In history, Green Bay, typically their number 2 wide receiver is a top 20 guy, and it looks to me like he's their number 2. So I would try to go get him when people are down on him since he's underperformed so far.
Okay. Mine is Alexander Mattison. We talked about him last week. I had him on the trade target report last week, but I think it just bears repeating. Dalvin Cook looks really good this year, but Dalvin Cook has never finished a season. Alexander Mattison, in the limited touches that he's had so far, I thought has looked great. I think he looks, to me, almost as good as Dalvin Cook. Now, does that mean he's better? I don't know yet. I think time will tell. But I will say, if anything happened to Dalvin Cook, Madison's going to come in and just be a fantasy stud. I think he can do everything that Cook's doing right now. If you've noticed how that team is trending, when they fired their offensive coordinator last year because they weren't running the ball enough, and now they're running the ball so much that their quarterback threw only 10 passes.
They're the anti-Bengals.
I know. They're just like the opposite.
And they won by 4 touchdowns.
Yeah. So that a running back in that system is going to be producing fantasy numbers. So right now is the best time to go get him because his value is probably the lowest because of Dalvin Cook, healthy, and running well. If you wait until Dalvin Cook gets hurt, it's too late.
Yep.
So
you better have $100 of your fab budget left.
You
that's what it's going to take.
It will take all of that.
Yeah.
So, Adam, who do you have?
Okay, yeah. So I got Preston Williams. It's not a sexy name because he plays for the Miami Dolphins, but
he may be the only shining light.
He absolutely. There. So we started the first year. He started the year half-point PPR, 9.9 and 8.3. We obviously know that they're going to be in a situation where they've got to throw the ball. So I do think this guy you actually could start maybe outside of a really tough matchup like a Chicago or something defensive-wise. But, you got a Kansas City. You got teams that are going to score a lot of points. Even Dallas this week, I'm going to start him in my Dynasty League in one of my flexes, mainly because Tyreek's out.
Yeah.
But either way, I feel confident starting him because, first of all, Dallas has the 21st ranked pass defense. And second of all, I know he's going to get his targets, and I know he's going to at least have some value. So I know we talked about this last week. I think even when you draft a guy like this, and especially in Dynasty, you're hoping for his talent to maybe either them to have low draft spots and to get somebody in there and get some talent around him or to ship him out. So I think you're kind of hoping for his future value, but I think you can at least feel confident starting this guy.
Well, and those draft spots are coming. I mean, Tim and I had a conversation earlier that I think they've had the most draft picks since the Browns.
Since the Browns a couple of years ago.
And you see what happened to the Browns. I mean, obviously we were just kind of dogging on them, but they'll turn it around eventually. They have the talent, so Miami is probably going to do the same thing.
Right. Yeah, so my next one is the Rams wide receivers. I touched on this just a little bit earlier, but just to give a little perspective. Half-one PPR this year so far in the first 2 weeks. Cooper Kupp is the wide receiver 29, Cooks is 39, and Woods is 45. Go get every single one of those guys if you can, because you know where they finished last year in 2018. Cooper Kupp finished wide receiver 13, Woods was 17, and Cooks was 19. So I think their value is as low as it's going to get. Their offense is not clicking like it's going to as we go into the rest of the season. So those guys are definitely good guys to go get.
All top 20. And if one of them gets injured, the other two seem to really step up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think Kupp is going to be the hardest one to go get because even though he hasn't had a great year so far, he's at least been solid. If you can go get Cooks right now, he has a really high ceiling, and he hasn't hit that yet. So,
and he has a high floor also. Yeah. I mean, people see him as this boomer bust guy, but he really has been a very consistent fantasy football player.
Okay, let's move on to our time to move on section. So, Eric, who do you have in the time to move on section?
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that when we say it's time to move on from these players, it's not always get rid of them off of your team. It could be a mindset. It could be a, monitor what they're doing. But the first person I have here is Jordan Howard. It's not that he's a bad running back. It's not that even he's not getting carries. But when you watch the games, Miles Sanders looks like the better running back, and he's going to continue to get more and more snaps. And if you watched last week, whenever they were down and the snaps really mattered, it was almost all Miles Sanders and Darren Sproles. So to me, I would, like I said, not necessarily give up on Jordan Howard, but I'm definitely not comfortable with him in my roster at this point.
I'm calling it now, Melvin Gordon to the Eagles.
It
you
could
heard
happen.
it here first.
I hope it doesn't, but it's possible.
They like to do that.
The Miami backfield, a lot of people had high hopes for Kenyon Drake, and then there were, of course, the Kalen Ballage truthers. They've looked awful so far, and I hate to keep harping on how bad Miami is, but
Ballage actually ducked a pass to him the other day.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the snap counts, they're playing Ballage more, and if you watch them play, there's no reason they should be doing that aside from they don't want to win.
Right.
I mean, it's really bad. And then, of course, Eli, boo-hoo, it's Eli, but he's...
hey, that's a 2-time Super Bowl MVP.
Well, it's time to move on.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's what he said today. I don't know if you saw his press conference, but they asked him kind of how he felt about the situation. He said, well, I'm not dead and the season's still going, so I have a lot to be thankful for. Whatever, just kind of pushed it aside. Ho-hum like Eli likes to do.
Right.
So.
Eeyore over there.
I would not be surprised if he makes it back on the field for the Giants this year.
It would not surprise me either.
Okay, well, now we're going to move on to the next segment. This is called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So the good is obviously players that we feel like are going to have a great week. The bad are players who we do not believe are going to have a good week. And the ugly are players who might feel ugly to play them, but they should be worth putting on your starting roster. So, Adam, why don't you kick us off? Who do you have for the good?
Yeah, so I actually have a combination of two guys, but it's Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. I know Mike Evans has underperformed a little bit. I think that kind of was tied a little bit to his illness from week one. I'm not sure that he had full time to get over that, but they're playing the Giants this week, who are ranked 30th against the pass, 321 yards a game, and 30th in points allowed at 31.5, or they're tied for 30th, I'm sorry. So I think that's obviously a very plus matchup for Tampa, who likes to throw the ball. Their offense looked like they were kickstarting just a little bit, like they were starting to feel themselves a little bit more. So yeah, I think we expect good things from them, or I do.
Okay. And as I mentioned earlier, all of the Dallas offense, I didn't want to put them all on here, so I just put all of the Dallas offense. But to pick a specific player not on the Dallas offense, I went with Evan Ingram. We talked about it a while ago. Daniel Jones is a starting quarterback there. They don't really have a lot of worthwhile targets other than Ingram and Barkley. So especially until Tate comes back from suspension. Evan Ingram's he's a stud. He's fast. He's big. Daniel Jones is not a bad quarterback. Now, what he does in his first game back, we don't know yet. But I believe Evan could have a huge game. I think they're going to try to utilize him to move the ball other than running, because Barkley's going to get a big share.
Yeah.
So I just
feel
he
like, should.
Oh, he should. He should.
He is their offense right now, pretty much.
But looking at their up against Tampa Bay this week, Tampa's weak on defending tight ends. They've had two tight ends, Greg Olsen being one of them last week that kind of went off on them. So I believe that he's going to be a very safe outlet for Daniel Jones. So highly recommend playing him this week.
Well, Eric, to your point too. We were talking about this just a little bit ago, but when it seems like teams, when they get a new quarterback in there, especially a rookie guy, their goal is to get the ball out of their hands, and that's why we know a tight end, a safety net kind of guy, is perfect week to play this guy because he's going to be hyper targeted.
He's quick enough to get separation fast, which goes to your point, right?
And he's got a yards after the catch. I mean, gosh, he ran a 4.3 as a tight end. That's crazy.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah, Eric, who do you have?
Well, I originally had DeAndre Hopkins, and the reason I put him on here, he's obviously one of, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL, but people were down on him after week 2. He had a bad week. He's playing the Chargers, who have allowed T.Y. Hilton 8 receptions for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then in week 2 they played Kenny Golladay, and he had 8 receptions for 117 yards and a touchdown. So I'm going to make him my honorable mention. My real good player would be Tyler Boyd. With the rise of John Ross, I think a lot of people have kind of decided that Boyd is the wide receiver 2 in that offense, and I don't agree with that. I just think that happens to be where the targets have went the first 2 weeks. This week they're playing the Bills, who have a really good shutdown cornerback, and I'm assuming he'll be playing against Ross, so that leaves Tyler Boyd open. The past 2 weeks, the Bills have allowed Crowder 14 receptions for 99 yards, and they played the Giants in week 2, so Giants didn't really get much going on any facet of the game aside from Saquon. I would also say that both of those teams are significantly less talented than Boyd. Crowder being, less talented, and then the Giants have no one that's anywhere close. And they have a worse quarterback, too. So that's why I think Boyd's going to have a good week this week. Okay.
Now let's move on to the bad. Adam, who do you have?
Yeah, so I have a guy that we're all high on, but Terry McLaurin. He's playing Chicago this week. We know that's going to be a bad matchup anyway, but his first 2 weeks, he's really showed up and showed out. But he played the Eagles, who are the 31st ranked defense against the pass, in Dallas, who's the 21st. So it's kind of hard for us to see what he's going to look like against real competition. And Case Keenum also. So I don't have much confidence starting him this week.
Okay. And mine's going to shock a lot of people, but I've got Dalvin Cook. The Raiders' front line is pretty good against the run. And after the beating they got from Kansas City last week, I expect John Gruden to kind of whip them into shape. They know that Cook's really talented. A lot of people are making their hay against Minnesota through the air. So, against the Raiders through the air. Minnesota has great receivers. Kirk Cousins probably going to throw the ball a little bit more than 10 times is my opinion. So I just don't think Dalvin's going to have a big game. I don't think he's going to completely bust, but I just think it's going to be bad. I think it's not going to be what you expect from him. If you had other backs that were, pretty high up there, I may consider playing them in place of him. So
yeah, which would be really hard to do because I think he's the running back 2 on the year right now. So
it would be tough to do.
Yeah.
But that's what it looks like to me anyway.
Okay, so going from one stud running back to the other, my guy's Le'Veon Bell. He's a really good running back, and he looked pretty good when he was the only thing that the Jets had playing against the Browns. He was the only shining point there. But they're playing the Patriots in this week, and the Patriots have given up 32 yards and 42 yards respectively. Bill Belichick generally will shut down one thing in that game, and originally
he takes your best weapon away.
Right.
So who is the New York Jets' best weapon?
Exactly.
Falk.
Yeah, it's Falk. So
Bell's
going to run
wild,
right? Yeah, obviously, I think they're just going to. We talked about they're probably just going to spy Bell, and every move he makes, they're going to have a linebacker doing the exact same thing. They're the police over there. So I just think that he's in for a bad week, and again, not necessarily that he's going to fail entirely, but don't expect what you've got from him so far.
Right, and we saw Monday night that he was their offense. I mean, they tried to get the ball out to Crowder and Robbie Anderson when Falk came in, but I mean, when third down was on the line, they went to Bell every time.
Yeah.
I mean,
he was a deer in headlights. He just looked lost.
Yeah. So okay, let's move on to the last part of this segment. It's called the ugly. Adam, kick us off. Who's your ugly player this week?
Yeah. So actually, to build off what you said about Dalvin Cook, I've got my ugly. That's Kirk Cousins, because he's playing Oakland's defense, who's actually the last ranked defense against the pass, 5th against the run. So they actually are not bad against the run. I completely agree with you. It should be a huge day, but it's Kirk Cousins. So we never know what to expect. We know he can put up huge numbers, but we know he can put up huge duds too. So
right, and so I've got a couple here that I want to throw out. So Rex Burkhead for the Patriots. I believe this is going to be another game that they're going to blow out. They're playing at home. When they're ahead, Rex gets some, he gets a lot of playing time. Everybody does, really. So he's just one of those backs that comes in, gets points, especially if he gets lucky and pops a touchdown in. So I believe he's going to be somebody you could probably rely on this week. And for the sake that they're going to take the Patriots are going to take Le'Veon Bell away from the Jets. Robbie Anderson stuck out to me as being somebody that Falk was trying to get the ball to quite a bit Monday night. Now with a week of practice, maybe they'll try a little bit more. So I actually think Robbie Anderson might be a decent play. He's really fast. He can maybe, get open quick for Falk to throw him the ball. So he's my other just kind of ugly play who might get some a little fantasy production this week, as opposed to he hasn't done much yet. So this could be a week to play him.
Yeah. And just we haven't got to mention this about Sam Darnold, but we saw reports today that said he's going to be back week 5. So for any of you Robbie Anderson owners that are going to be frustrated for the next few weeks, hold on, hang on. He's great when he's got Sam Darnold. So.
And even when Darnold comes back, who's to say he's going to be full strength? I mean, mono is one of those unpredictable things. So
right.
Yeah.
Eric, who do you have? I'm sorry.
Well, this may be the ugliest of ugly players of all time. It's Frank Gore, the guy you never want to play but probably always should. This is kind of contingent on Devin Singletary. If Devin Singletary plays, it's going to take away some of what Gore can do, but I still think he's a solid play because I don't think they're going to run Singletary the way that they maybe would have if he was healthy. But they played the Bengals, who allowed 259 rushing yards to the 49ers last week. If he gets half of that and no touchdowns, you're happy. If he gets the touchdown, then he has a great week. So to me, Frank Gore is a pretty obvious ugly play this week.
The dinosaur himself.
Yeah.
Okay, so any last words?
No.
No.
Nothing special. Enjoy the weekend.
All right. Well, that does it for today for us. If we'd like to hear from you, actually. So if you want to drop us a note, send it to dynastyguysff@gmail.com or dynastyguysff. Say it again. dynastyguysff@gmail.com. And what's our Twitter?
You can follow us on Twitter at dynastyguysff.
All right. Thanks.
Appreciate it, guys. Have a good one.